Hello and welcome to the Tool Assisted Podcast. Today is the 30th of July 2019, and today we're with Colin from last time, also known as EZGames69, and MemoryTAS, also known as Memory. And we're talking mainly about the Bonk series, but we'll also be talking about a range of other topics. So Colin, you were on last time. Can you briefly reintroduce yourself for those who didn't catch the last episode?
Yeah, so my name is EZGames, or my real name is Colin. I do a lot of different tasks for different games. The last episode, I mostly focused on the Splatterhouse series because I did Splatterhouse 1 and 2. I also did a task of Bonk's Revenge with Memory.
Good stuff. And Memory, so this is actually pretty interesting because this is the first time we've had a TAS Video staff member on the podcast. So can you briefly tell us, I guess, a bit about yourself and also a bit about what you do on the site?
All right. Hi, I'm MemoryTAS. Please don't call me TAS. I get that in Twitch chat a bunch. So I'm a current judge on TASVideos.org, and I've also tasked a bunch of games, notably, every single TurboGrafx-16 Bonk game and the NES Bonk's Adventure. As judge on task videos, I look into a lot of I look at submissions and make sure that one, they follow the rules and stuff, and two, that they're of decent quality, and determine tiering and stuff. So task videos has 3 tiers: Vault, Moon, and Stars. I really only deal with the first 2. The last one's more the Starman, but depending on entertainment and on rule stuff, I usually determine whether or not it's Moons or Vault. And the other part of it is, checking to make sure the task is good, and that's actually how I got into the Bonk series. I got we got a submission for Bonk's Adventure NES, and I felt I could do way better than that, and I ended up testing the whole series, more or less.
So when was that NES submission?
I think May of 2018.
Okay, so did you then go through and co-author the TAS with the original submitter, or did you just take over and find a lot of improvements?
Eventually, at first I was planning on co-authoring, but then I just started over completely, more or less. I had watched the Bonk's Adventure and Bonk's Revenge tasks, the TurboGrafx-16 ones, and I pulled some some of the things I realized were applicable between TurboGrafx-16 and NES, and that's how I got some of the improvements. And I was actually thinking about doing TurboGrafx-16 before. I noticed some things that could maybe be improvable, but I didn't actually get around to it until after NES.
Yeah, and funny enough, when the reason why I did Splatterhouse was because I had done Bonk's Revenge on TurboGrafx-16, and it made me want to do more TurboGrafx-16 games, and Splatterhouse was one of those games that was kind of interesting to me, so I did that.
Interesting. And TurboGrafx-16, I was noticing it's pretty advanced compared to some of the other consoles at the time. Do you often have to deal with lag reduction and stuff, or is it that powerful that you don't?
Usually I don't have to deal with it too much in regards to that. Though I don't think it's so much the power so much as just being aware of the limitations. When it comes to the individual games. I imagine other games are more laggy than up.
I think in my experience, most of the TurboGrafx-16 games don't have a lot of lag in them. Yes, there are some games that do have it, but I think overall, most of the games are pretty consistent and not lagging as much. like for Bonk's Revenge specifically, there can be so many sprites on the screen, and yet there'd be no slowdown. Although there are other games where that just isn't the case, because maybe it's not optimized as much. But yeah, it's like even for Splatterhouse, there was like no lag at all.
Bonk's Adventure is a weird case in regards to that. It has like some lag, but like the game still continues to run for the most part. Like it has input lag more than it has like just full stop lag.
Oh, so the character will kind of compensate their movement for the lag or something?
Like it won't read your input, but it'll still move the same amount.
Oh, yeah, we were going through that with like Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64 last episode. They're very similar too.
By the way, Memory, since I want to ask a question about judging in particular, what would you say was probably like the most difficult movie to judge, or just like to like analyze and stuff like that?
I don't really remember off the top of my head. A lot of the times I have like trouble when there's not as much feedback when it comes to determining tiers.
Mm-hmm.
City Connection was annoying because everybody was wrong and
Yeah. Just so you know, 8-bit, I was one of the authors for that task, so it was kind of a mess.
So basically the issue was that the game actually looped a lot further than we thought it did.
Oh, yeah, I'm pulling it up now, actually. Yeah, okay.
So, like right now, the current publication is is one with warps, but it obsoleted one that was supposed to be warpless, and the one that's warpless did not finish all the unique stages.
Okay, so it was, 4 minutes 35, and then your new TAS was like 10 minutes or something?
Yeah, because it completed more of the game.
Reminds me of that Spider-Man Atari game. Didn't a similar thing happen there?
Not aware of that game much.
I think people just found like new screens on it or something. Wow, okay.
But
So do you have to redo some stuff? Like, is there fairly repetitive gameplay to get to these extra screens?
it was more that the backgrounds repeated, so like it had like the game had like 6 backgrounds, and basically it was thought, oh, you did all 6 backgrounds. That's clearly the end. And it's like, no, they're actually unique program stages. It's not like procedurally generated or anything. Like that was the impression I was going on, was that it was like some sort of procedural generation, but no, it was like pre-programmed unique stages.
So how many unique stages are there in total then?
I wouldn't remember. I haven't done it in a while.
I think like 16.
Cool. Yeah, I think that those controversial ones that split people, it's very hard to make a decision. Would you find that you're influenced by the audience a lot about what they think should and shouldn't be published?
When it comes to what should and shouldn't be published, not really, unless it's a strange category. So basically, for Vault, like we have Vault, which is pretty much if it's fastest completion or full completion, and it follows the rules for those, it's good as long as it's legitimate and doesn't suck. Like, um, for Moons, it's like if the category is something weirder, like Super Mario 64 DS jump lists, like then audience participation comes into like whether or not it gets published.
Yeah, because you can't put that in Vault, can you? Because Vault's only for any percent or 100%.
Yeah.
I'm a bit nervous about that Moons requirement because I'm trying to do Symphony and Night Maria all bosses, and we've determined that there's this boss that you can actually fight through methods of a glitch, which you're not supposed to fight as Maria. You're supposed to fight them as as Alucard.
Alucard.
Yeah, the boss the boss in question is actually Maria. So it would be a Maria versus Maria fight. Um, but the issue that I had with doing that boss was that the setup for getting into the room where Maria is, it's very tedious because the way that it works is that you have to wait for a certain statue to move to clip you out of bounds, and that statue takes about a minute before it can move. So there's a lot of wasted time if I were just to like try to do the clip right away. So what I'm trying to do is figure out if I can come back later and get into that room like at a time that the statue will move right away, so I don't have to like sit there for an entire minute or less. But I mean, I don't mind showing it off. It's just it's the setup that's kind of making me nervous. But I think my plan is going to work out.
I'm on a split on it myself. I get both sides. Um, though, if you've heard like anything at all about like Symphony Night, like Alucard, there's a segment in like that is called the Clock Rush, where basically you want to get past that statue in time, since it's cycle based.
Yeah, and Clock Rush won't actually matter too much to me.
It matters in a different way in this task because of the glitch.
Yeah, but if I didn't have to, if like for example, I didn't have to, if there was like no way for me to fight Maria in this category, then Clock Rush would not matter all that much because I'm able to get fast enough to the clock room to be able to get past the statue, and even if I wasn't able to, I can easily just like change the sync settings for Saturn to start power on at a certain time, so then the clock would be out of the way by the time I get to that room. Is
that clock actually based on the real time on Saturn?
You can set it to be real time, but you can also set
That's
it
crazy.
but you can set it to be a certain time.
All right, so it's an option basically.
Yeah.
It's like obviously you don't want it to be based on real time if you're doing like RTA. That would be awful.
Yeah, I actually remember when Rom Scout did a run of Maria All Bosses at a GDQ. I do not remember which one it was. I remember that he had to.
13, I think it was 13.
Yeah, in 2013, he sorry, blanking. He started out like turning on the Saturn, but like immediately going into the clock settings to change the time to be like a certain time, and then he like started the game as normal. Of course, having to like get past a region lock with a cheat thing, or I forget what it's called. But he also had like a timer on his phone, so he knew exactly like when the clock would change, because that statue moves every other minute.
Cool. Yeah, I could see why that would be useful for RTA. Reminds me of the Gen 4 Pokemon where they're constantly changing the clock before runs as well.
Yeah.
I don't think I actually ever got around to explaining like how I got into tassing and like all that in the first place.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you that, Memory. Yeah, so like gaming in general, like what did you grow up with, and then how did you get into tazzing?
All right, so basically my introduction to gaming was all right. There was like educational games for PC, um, Lego.com games, uh, and at this party I went like party of like this friend of the family or something. They had a Super Nintendo in their basement, and I played a bit of Super Mario World on that. And then my first like console was a Game Boy Advance and then GameCube. And from there, I ended up getting a ton of crappy license games and having every glitch possible occur to me in even good games. And that kind of set the stage for what I would be doing later because I am like very familiar with good games glitching on me in
Yeah,
ways
I think
that
you
I
said.
did not anticipate.
Yeah, I think you said before, like when you used to play games casually, it was always like you just trying to find as many glitches as possible.
No, I would try to find the intended way and end up finding as many glitches as possible.
Okay.
Um, or sometimes I would get completely lost and end up screwing around instead and find glitches that way. So in 2007, I Googled Metroid and found a site called Metroid 2002, which was like basically the hub for Metroid speedrunning at the time. Had like a ton of glitches, ton of sequence breaks on the main site, and had forums. And that was pretty much my like introduction to speedrunning, more or less. From there, I found SDA, and I kind of like didn't really do too much with it at first. Like I posted like some tricks here and there, and some like sort of throughout, like the bare minimum to complete the certain game. But I didn't really get into it. Like I kind of stopped paying attention to it as much until about 2013 or 2014. And then in 2015, I saw this run of this Bionicle Game Boy Advance game that I owned as a kid submitted to SDA. And they got stuck on this one segment, and I kind of knew exactly what was going on. But it, like, they just didn't realize what was going on in time and wasted like a minute or so on that one segment. So, but I felt kind of bad for them. So I just found a way to skip like half the game instead.
Nice. And then nobody knew about that before.
No, I think and I kept finding glitches in that game, and eventually the RTA runner just kind of vanished. So I was just kind of left wondering, like, what am I doing this for? And then, you know, I was like, screw it, I'll just test it or something. I don't have a capture code anyways, and that was pretty much my introduction to tasking. Was that Bionicle GBA game? Like, I think a lot of the glitches I found, I had actually found when I was a kid, but I had to rediscover them and like realize how they work and how they could be abused. And that was my first task, more or less. I did two iterations of it before I submitted the second iteration of the task to task videos, and that was my first submission. Then I did Metroid Prime Hunters for the DS. Uh, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 for the Game Boy, and eh, Sonic Pocket Adventure I before I became judge.
I have a question. Did you when you did the when you did Bionicle for the GBA, did you use Test Studio at the time, or
Absolutely. It made it a lot easier for me to get into testing.
so what would you say? What would you say like is the because when you're switching over to like BizHawk, which has Test Video, which has Test Studio, to DS, which has the old method of tasking, was it kind of like a rough transition?
Honestly, it wasn't too bad. I I think starting out with Test Studio made it easier for me to like understand the concepts, and then I didn't strictly need it as much. it's nice, but I didn't need it per se.
Wow, because no TAS Studio puts me off TASing some consoles, to be honest. But I suppose if you got used to TASing it by hand, the traditional method, it would be okay.
The real problem with DS was the fact that I didn't know about auto hold stylus until I was pretty much entirely done with Metroid Prime Hunters. So that meant so with auto hold stylus, you just click on a spot and then it'll like automatically press that input unless you toggle it off. Like it's, let's say, like 128, like 53 or something, its coordinates. So like you press it and then it'll constantly press that spot until you either move the position or you toggle it off. I didn't know about that, so I had to manually click on this emulator every frame I wanted to do touchscreen input. I had some interesting hand positions.
Wow. Was it very hidden, or did you just never think to hit that
I
button?
didn't. It was. I kind of didn't realize it was in the hotkeys, but it was a lifesaver once I found out about it. But it was already kind of late at that point. I think I was like 5 minutes or so left in the task or something.
Wow. It's funny looking back on those old methods you have for TASing, and some of them are very inefficient looking back on them. But, yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about learning how to use the emulators better.
Yeah, like even right now, I'm redoing my very first task, and there's a lot of things that I did not know when I first made that task. Like I didn't know that you could shift up and down inputs using insert and control delete. So
that's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, cause every time I want.
If it wasn't for the fact that the home button is right next to it, and I often accidentally press that button and delete a frame at the start of the test.
And that gets rid of all your green zones, and you have to watch the entire thing over.
That's why I save ridiculously often.
If you have turbo, it's fine, but if you're doing a system where turbo is basically useless, then it can be very annoying. Saturn.
Yeah, there's sometimes weird things like that can happen and cause desyncs as well. It's just very scary.
Yeah, that's another reason why I really don't like to do movies unless there's a input roll with it, because I'm afraid that something's going to desync when I try to replay it, and I just have no idea how to fix it. I would have to it's just not really convenient, basically. I would prefer to have more control over the inputs that are made in a movie and not have to deal with a bunch of other crap.
Yeah.
I feel I'm able to adapt a lot easier, so that isn't too big of an issue to me. I just need to be more cautious.
That's probably what you need for being a judge as well. You need to be ready to be able to test something on DS to compare, for example. I would probably not touch it if you couldn't emulate it on BizHawk.
DS is the least of the problems.
You have MAME to deal with.
Then there's JPC for DOS.
Oof.
What the heck is that?
DOS.
What?
I've heard basically Slammo is I thought this was tasking was until he tried any other emulator.
And don't you have to try out TASing and see if you can beat the TAS sometimes as well when you're judging?
Oh yeah. Well,
yeah.
Basically, I have what I call more or less the 1 hour rule. If I don't have an avenue of, oh, I see an improvement here, I think this might be improvable, or oh, there's an improvement here, within about an hour, I think it's pretty much good enough. Because the point of judging isn't oh, this has to be perfect, perfect, perfect. People are going to be new. People are going to there's going to be different skill levels of tasking, even amongst people that have doing it for a little bit. and like I don't want to set the bar like ridiculously high. So the important thing for me is like, can I beat it in an hour? And obviously, I also want to make sure that like said improvement sticks. It's not like, oh, you saved one frame and then actually it's a frame roll, so it doesn't matter. Like that's no. But
Yeah, Symphony of the Night has a lot of that, and you obviously don't want to reject a movie if you can find like one frame improvement.
Yeah, that was my next question. What if you spend an hour and then, like, 59 minutes in, you save exactly one frame?
I've done that more once at least.
I feel like in that case, all you would really do is like let the author know that like, hey, I found a frame improvement. Do you think this is something you can incorporate? And
Well, it wasn't. I don't think it was exactly like a frame. It was a second, but the problem was it was Bomberman 64, the second attack, like the party mode speed run, which was like 2 hours long or something ridiculous, and was incredibly RNG heavy. So, like, I found an improvement on one like 100 or so levels. So it's like I'm not gonna reject over this. It'd be nice if it was incorporated, but whatever.
Yeah, and because speed games develop so quickly, by the time they incorporate that, people would probably find new tech and obsolete it anyway.
Well, it was just well, Bomberman 64 like second attack like party mode is kind of weird because like half of the modes are just timed. Like it it was like a tournament system in the battle mode, which was more or less the multiplayer, but like there are some modes where it's like, oh, you have to get the most points within 60 seconds. So you're not gonna speed up the 60 seconds at all, like other than reducing lag. You just have to be able to win. But other modes are timed. Like in that set of modes were timed.
Okay, so what, like, half of it's an auto scroller and half of it's not?
Yeah, more or less. Well, it's well, I wouldn't say half because the half that is an auto scroller ends up being a lot longer.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I have quite a few games from my childhood that are actually like that, half auto scroller, half not, and I've been tempted to TAS them, but then put off about all the auto scrolling. Lawnmower Man on Genesis comes as an example.
so yeah, I think we could probably move on to Bonk now, since we've already talked a lot about different topics.
Yeah, probably about time too. So, like, Bonk, pretty much a mascot of the TurboGrafx-16. Does one of you want to kind of explain what kind of game it is and the context at the time when it came out?
So, Bonk is a series of platformers. E- It seems like it was more or less intended to be like a rival of sorts to Mario and Sonic, but the difference between Bonk and alright, one thing about the TurboGrafx-16, like in general, is that every like aside from the initial batch of controllers, every controller for the TurboGrafx-16 PC or PC Engine, as it's known in some regions, is that they all of them have turbo built into the controller. So turbo's actually a feature rather than like something like some cheaty controller accessory. So the Bonk game, like a bunch of TurboGrafx-16 games, actually like incorporated a hidden feature or two, like that took advantage of turbo. And in Bonk, that was air spinning. Basically, if you spam the attack button in every Bonk game, more or less, you like sort of hover, and it's actually a feature.
I think I remember seeing tweet from your memory that you were like debating whether or not it was a bug or a feature, and you reckon it was a feature?
There should be no debate. It is definitely a feature. It's even in like the demo screen of Bonk 3.
Imagine how frustrating that demo would be to see if you didn't have that turbo controller, like one of
It's
those initial
every
runs.
like you'd well one you'd be like one of the first TurboGrafx-16 owners ever if you were, because every controller for that system had it aside from the first few.
I heard a rumor that the TurboGrafx-16 Mini that's supposed to come out pretty soon, it won't have turbo controls, which I'm very appalled by. Although I don't know if they
I
changed
heard
it.
it will, but not in Japan.
Interesting. I
The
wonder.
Japanese communities love their turbo controllers.
I think it might be the case that like the initial PC Engine controllers were like only like the ones without turbo were only in Japan. It might be that case, I don't know. But that's like my theory.
At this point, the TurboGrafx-16 Mini seems pretty faithful to the original console. Like, I was worried that they wouldn't be including any Bonk games, but one of the trailers that they released probably like 2 weeks ago, it said it's going to feature Bonk's Revenge, which is pretty nice.
Revenge is probably like the best for casual, at least. Uh, One thing about the Bonk series in general is that the games are very wacky. Like compared to like Mario and Sonic, like even though like Mario's like a plumber that jumps on turtles and Sonic's like a talking hedgehog, Bonk's really weird. Like you like in the first game you get pooped out of a dinosaur. In the second game, like you like go on board this ship and like there's these dinosaurs dressed as like waiters. And then in like the and like when Bonk gets powered up, his head becomes a butt.
A headbutt.
Yeah. And in the Super Bonk for the SNES, like if you're giant and powered up, you like become like your body turns into like either a chicken or a dinosaur, but you still have Bonk's head on top.
Also,
And
it's
I've
kind of
mainly seen these like by watching the Taz's or watching the speedruns completely out of context of ever having played the game, so it seems weirder from that perspective. So
one of my favorite cutscenes in Super Bonk on the Super Nintendo is after you beat the second world boss, a dinosaur will because you're inside of a dinosaur's mouth at this point. The dinosaur will like sneeze and like he'll sneeze you out of his nose, and then you'll be shot into the into outer space, and that's how you get to the third world. It's a really weird series, but it's so funny. But we have not done the Super Nintendo version yet, and I don't think Memory's up for it at all.
No,
has anyone done speedruns or Taz's of it at all?
they've done their speedruns, but there's some issues with Super Bonk.
Oh, actually, you know what? I just remembered something. Last episode of this podcast, I had made a mistake. I was trying to give Lat Mackey a shout out. He's the speedrunner of Bonk's Revenge, who did the speedrun at GDQ. But I accidentally said that he was the guy that did the TAS at GDQ, which is not the case. So I'm a bit embarrassed about doing that. So just want to correct it real quick.
Oh yeah, no worries. That's in the show notes there as a correction, but it's good to have it in the audio as well. Yeah. How convenient you're on for the very next episode.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I watched through the GDQ run of Bonk's Revenge, and it was very fascinating. Like, TurboGrafx-16s as well, they were very expensive, so perhaps that's what made them a little bit less popular than, say, Mario or Sonic. They definitely seem superior, technically. Like, it's a very, very smooth game for 1991.
The thing is that the TurboGrafx 16 despite having 16 in the title, it only had a 16-bit graphics processor. It actually had an 8-bit CPU.
So it was basically like a beefy 8-bit console. The other thing is that it doesn't support parallax scrolling. So like a lot of Genesis and Super Nintendo games, you'll see like backgrounds like moving like in different
The thing about
frequencies.
the thing about the TurboGrafx 16 and the PC Engine, well, like PC Engine is pretty much the name of it outside of the US. Um, in Japan, it was actually the first of the 16-bit consoles. So it was in a sense a bit more popular in Japan than it was in the West. Like by that by the time it was released in the West for I think like the Genesis was out.
Yeah, if you put it next to the Genesis, it's not super impressive. But if you put it next to the NES and the Master System, it really is.
Yeah.
So I'm always confused about like the TurboGrafx. Does it take like CDs or cartridges or both? I can never like tell.
Depends on which. All right, the original PC Engine and TurboGrafx 16, they took cartridges. However, there was an updated model that used CDs.
Okay, so both, I suppose. I always really like what I played on it has been really impressive, especially Ease 1 and 2. They're amazing on that console.
Like Bonk 3 was actually released in both formats. Like initially it was just on the cartridge version, and then they updated it to be released on CD, and they changed a bunch of the audio for for better or worse.
Is there any gameplay differences between the two?
As far as I could tell, no. But well, I think there was like a side mode or something that was different, but that's not really relevant. I prefer the original soundtrack though. It sounds a bit more wacky to me, and like wacky is really important to Bonk.
Definitely. And you probably prefer the original loading times too.
I never actually like messed around with the CD version on emulator. I just looked at like a long play or something and figured how it worked from there.
Personally, I like the sound chip for the TurboGrafx 16. I think it's really cool.
Though I do feel like I didn't give Bonk's 3 like CD versions soundtrack enough of a chance the first time. It's not bad, aside from the final boss theme. That is awful.
I still haven't heard that. I need to listen to that soon.
Yeah, I'm a bit like that coming back to the Ease series. Like, it's really amazing soundtrack on the TurboGrafx 16, but I am very nostalgic for that Master System soundtrack. And also with the FM sound on Master System, it's really good.
Anyway, want to talk about the run now?
Yeah, definitely.
Normally, I would recommend, like, normally you would think, oh, let's talk about them in chronological order. This is one series where that doesn't really work because, for whatever reason, they pretty much alternated between engines. So, Bonk 1 uses one engine, Bonk's Revenge uses a different engine. Bonk 3 uses the first game's engine. And then Super Bonk, which is essentially Bonk 4, uses the second game's engine. So they just alternated between engines for seemingly little reason.
It's possible that they could just have like different developers for each game, and then like they never just had like a consistent one. Although that's just a theory.
I'm amazed that crossed over to the Super Nintendo as well.
It crossed over to the Super Nintendo after the TurboGrafx, I think, was discontinued in the United States. So Hudson Soft and I think Red, they just decided to release a game on Super Nintendo.
Oh yeah, what I mean is like I'm amazed that the Because you said the second game's physics are very similar to the fourth game. I'm amazed that they are similar given their different systems.
It, like I've and like I've found addresses for both, and it's like the speed, etc., work pretty much like they do in the second game. Except 4 removes everything, either removes or nerfs everything fun, and that's why I don't want to do it.
Yeah, I remember trying out because I had tried it before, but just with no knowledge of like how the Bonk series is. But the second time I tried it, which was after I did Bonk's Revenge, I had realized something that really made me angry was that every time you land after you do a jump, Bonk's speed goes down to 0 for about 1 frame. And I was like, oh, come on. I hate this.
It doesn't actually go down to 0 for 1 frame. It just like subtracts like a certain amount of speed every time you land.
Yeah, and I hate that. It's so bad.
But I think it's best to actually discuss Bonk 2 first, because Bonk 3's like similarities with Bonk 1 is more important, like really important. So like, all right, in Bonk 2, oh, a lot of you're pretty much one of the most important things about Bonk 2 is that there's this item called meats. Like there's these meat items, and if you grab one, it'll if you grab a small meat, it'll increase your power up level by 1. If you grab a big meat, it'll automatically increase you to the highest level. And whenever you get to the highest level, you're invincible and you're a lot faster. So you generally want to get to like meat, but that effect is only temporarily. Eventually, the invincibility wears off, and then you get into like this 1.5 level. It's really hard to explain. It's like Bonk appears like identical, but it just isn't flashing like between levels 2 and 3.
So basically, the meat is like this game's version of mushrooms and fire flowers from Mario. So, although it's only one
Except
item.
yeah, thing is, like for a period of time after you get like the level, like what basically there's a period after you get to like basically the fire flower level where you're even better, but like you're invincible and you move really fast, but that doesn't last forever. And power ups in general don't last forever. You generally go down to like you slowly degrade to like power level 2 and then power level 1 and then no power up.
I was going to say it sounds a little bit like Supersonic as well. But you get a cutscene as well for eating that meat. Is it ever the case where it's like not worth it to go to that higher level because of the cutscene of eating the meat?
It almost always is, but there are some ways around it. All right. So the lower levels do give you a speed boost as well. It's identical for both like power level 1 and power level 2, but it's not as high as like, the highest level. But there are methods of maintaining that speed indefinitely. Obviously, like, all right, one of the key tricks in the entire Bonk series is air spinning, where you spam the attack button. Obviously, the first way that was thought of to like maintain that speed was to, just stay in the air for longer. Because only on the ground do you get like reset to a lower speed, assuming you don't hold like the direction pad. However, we then found a trick where you could basically bunny hop, where if you jump and only press right, like or left on D-pad right when you land, you maintain all the speed, and you can just maintain like a high level meat speed for the entire level if you do it right.
Okay, so then the cutscene is definitely worth it. And so in the air, you're like holding neutral, but for one frame on the ground, you press right and then you jump again, or left. Cool. So, like, who actually found that? Was it fairly recent, or it's been known for a while?
Colin actually found it, but we didn't really realize the like just how it
We
worked until much later.
I think we mostly found it in some of the later levels because we'll probably get to that later. Although if it's okay to talk about it, one of the later levels of the game, there's these conveyor belts that pretty much give you like the fastest movement in the entire game. And what you can do is you can actually stack up a bunch of speed if you like do bunny hops on those conveyor
Hop
belts.
off the conveyor belts. It like adds like 480 speed or something like every time you jump off it. So it through bunny hopping you just keep the speed from landing, but then it adds additional speed, so you just keep building speed forever, assuming you have enough conveyor belts.
It seems so weird that it's adding and subtracting to speed rather than setting your speed to a specific value.
Well, I think it's just how the game how it deals with speed because like if you're still moving, like if you're on a surface that will make you move, like it probably will have a harder time trying to reset that speed. But if you're on a surface that doesn't make you move, then it can easily turn it down.
Can you ever build up enough speed off those to, like, clip through walls?
No, there's not enough room, unfortunately.
Okay.
Like, the only conveyor belts in the game are at the very end, so it's unfortunate in that sense.
Yeah, I really wish there was more conveyor belts in the entire game.
It's like there's like you quickly build up enough speed that you don't you you, you could make it through the like level pretty quick. It kind that level in particular kind of zigzags, so you can't just hold like left or right the entire way. You have to zigzag around.
Oh yeah, but they would help to, like, speed up the section.
Yeah.
The other thing about that level in particular is you have to try to manipulate a meat drop from some of the boxes in that level, and an easy way for us to do this is to pause the game at certain areas. Like I basically grinded every single possible pause that I can do to manipulate as many meats as I can, and it was a bit of a challenge. Like when I had tried doing this game as solo, because I had done an iteration of this task before, and then Memory jumped in to improve some more stuff.
And then I had you do the first meet, and then I'm like, oh, I just skipped the second crab crusher. Oh, I just found out you could build up speed forever. Guess you have to redo the first meet.
Yeah, I'm mostly like after I finished my iteration of this task, Memory went through and tried to improve as much as she could. The only thing that she couldn't do was most of the bosses because those kind of required a bit of knowledge onto how to deal with. Like specifically for the second boss, which I think is like a rhinoceros type of. I can't remember. It's based off a dinosaur. I don't remember the name of it is. Like a triceratops, I think.
I remember that the boss name. Oh, Triceratops.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think it's the name of the dinosaur. But the name of the boss is like Witch Doctor or something.
So anyway, on that boss in particular, she was not able to get the quick kill that I was able to. And the way that I was able to get the quick kill was that boss has two different hitboxes, one for its body and then one for the top of its head. So what I could do is I could actually get inside of like in between both hitboxes. And so I don't know if we ever mentioned this, but when you're in the air and you press the attack button once, Bonk will spin like halfway, and then he'll like dart down. downward onto an
He'll do like
enemy.
a dive. He'll do like a dive motion, but he won't stick up his hands like he's diving. He just hits things with his head. That's
Yeah,
Bonk's main attack method in general, is just hitting things with his head.
yeah. So and every time you land on an enemy with your head in the downward position, you will immediately like have your head going up again, and
You bounce off enemies whenever you hit them in that way.
yeah,
Also, it deals double damage.
yeah, and also there's always a hitbox on the top of Bonk's head, no matter if he's upright or downward. So if you can actually like hit enemies from below them, and you can hit them with your head, and you can do damage. So the idea is to get between those two hitboxes and just kind of like alternate hitting both of them. So like I could do like a dive bonk, and then immediately like go back up, and then hit the other hitbox, and then go back down again, and just keep doing that alternating that to get the quick kill.
Can you alternate that every frame, or is there a bit of a delay on it?
There's a bit of delay because like hitting them downward will make you go back upright, but hitting them from below will not make Bonk. It won't make him go downward right away. You have to kind of like manually do that on the frame that you already hit the hitbox from below. So whatever delay that is, it's kind of like that. But it happens so fast that it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, so what would this look like with you two working on that, Taz? Like, who's doing most of the inputs? So you said you did the bosses, Colin, but are you both doing a lot of inputs, or is one of you just throwing ideas around?
Basically, Colin did the first iteration. Then, by that point, I had finished both versions of Bonk's Adventure, the first game, and I was like, I think I think I could do better in certain spots, and so I basically had to look over the entire game.
The reason why I did this game in particular is because after Memory submitted her NES Bonk TAS, the tasser of the original PCE version of that game came in and said, "Hey, there's all these other improvements that you can add to the first game." So she was like, "Okay, I'll do that then," and that got me interested in looking at the other games. So I took a look at the current TAS for Bonk's Revenge. Which was done on I think it was like a 2009 task by Fuzzard. And there was a few spots that I noticed that really did not really make any sense. Like, there was one point in the first level where Fuzzard, like, went forward, but then, like, immediately, like, backtracked to pick up a meat power-up. And I was like, I don't think there's any reason that you need to do that. So I tried doing that level for a bit, and I got ahead. And then I was like, okay, so I'm going to just finish this. And maybe I can, like, finish this by the time Memory's done with her tasks. So, like, we could, like, both submit them at the same time.
But then I ended up waiting on that submission because I ended up submitting it to Marathon. So my Bonk's Adventure PCE task came out much later. Anyways.
Okay, is there still footage of that marathon showing, or?
Yeah, I think there's a VOD up on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, if you send it to me, I can link it in the show notes.
Okay. But anyway, so I had finished that iteration. Actually, there was 2 iterations I did by myself. The first one, it was fine, but then I realized that there was a way to skip the stage splash screen. And it's really weird because it's not like you can like press start to get rid of it. You have to press both 1 and 2 buttons to get rid of that. And at this point, I was trying to get a sub 18, and I didn't get it in my first iteration. Like, I was probably like 10 or 12 seconds off. But because of this stage splash screen skip that I was able to get past that. And so that second iteration was done, and I had to like resync all the other stages, which was not easy, especially the last few stages where I had to manipulate a meat drop with pauses. So I did that, but when I showed Memory, she didn't think it was all that optimized. So then what she did was she tried to like do a bunch of stages, and she ended up finding quite a little bit more improvements, which were either overlooked by me or were just like things that she just found on as she was doing it.
Like the first screen of the game is kind of different from a lot of like other like platformers. Like a lot of the times platformer it's head right. In Bonk's Revenge, the first level you actually want to go up. It's the waterfall climbing stage. And like one thing that I think is really kind of tricky to optimize in tasking and like really sets like people apart in terms of skill is like turning around. Like in that stage you have to zigzag a lot. And like optimizing just like how much you zigzag is really important. And like that's why I felt like I could do better on it was because like just optimizing zigzags is fairly hard in general.
Yeah, and even when I like tried to improve some of her zigzagging, I was never. It almost doesn't feel consistent. Like you could like go a little bit farther to the right on a waterfall, and then go left, and then like that's faster. But then like if you go even farther right and then go left, it won't be as fast. Like it's almost random, I would
Like
say. But
that level is like has a bunch of slopes as well. So like you go further left, so which is further away from like the next waterfall segment, but it's higher up. So like it's sort of a bounce there.
Yeah, I remember going through a lot of this zigzag optimization in Sonic 1 on the Master System. It's always hard to tell, like, what axis you're trying to optimize for with your movement, and it's always changing back and forth. It's very difficult.
exactly.
But,
And
yeah.
this level in particular actually makes a return near the end of the game. Although I would say that version of the level is a lot more easier to optimize because you can actually bounce off a lot of enemies, which will get you a little bit higher up in level. And like Memory just said, there's also a really big skip at the end where we can manipulate two flies.
Yeah, like you draw out some flying enemies, and then you just barely hit the next loading zone from below.
Yeah, and that probably saves about like I don't think we ever timed it, but I'm gonna say probably like 3 or 4 seconds.
Wow. That's pretty good.
One thing that sort of drew me to the Bonk series in general, and was why I sort of like picked the NES game right away, was I had the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Game Boy game I had dealt with before, like I had tasked before, had like this hover mechanic, which was like really important between like for saving time, and so like the fact that Bonk also has hover mechanics was sort of why I picked it up. Because one thing you can do with hover mechanics that isn't like in a lot of games is that not only can you like use them to fall slower, but you can actually also use them to fall like to fall faster in a way by like skipping the part of the jump where you're still going up. Like so like you can cancel a jump by hovering.
If you hover and then stop hovering, could you, like, jump up, then go sideways for a bit, then continue a little bit of that upwards arc, or not?
No, you immediately like all right. So in all Bonk games, if you air spin, it will set your vertical speed to 0 for a little while, and that means, and then after that you will fall.
Yeah, so you're not going up after attacking in the air.
Unless you land on an enemy. That will bounce you.
Okay, yeah.
I have done a game where it is the case where even after you like hover for a little bit, you'll still get some upward movement. And that was The Lion King 2 on Genesis. And it looks really stupid.
Sounds like it. I thought you were going to say Donald Land, actually.
I still need to freaking
Oh, no.
like submit, I'm planning on submitting that at some point with like team fours, like most of the stages, and then I think it was your team's last stage that I would graft onto the end.
I spent so much time on one of the rooms in that last stage. It was ridiculous. But yeah, Team 4's effort on Donald Land was insane. I don't know how they optimized that so well. It's such a hard game, though.
Yeah. Anyways, but the thing is that with this kind of hover mechanic, it means you can cancel your upwards momentum. So that means if you need to land sooner, you could do that with hovering.
Yeah, and I think that's used quite a lot in the conveyor belt scene. So you can hit the conveyor belt as soon as possible, and you can build up so much speed.
Yeah, so you repeatedly you hover so that you stop going up in your jump, and then you land on the conveyor belt again and again and again.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't put two and two together when you said those two things. Clever.
There's also a really interesting movement tech involving swimming, which, well, first off, I just want to say at the beginning of the second level, Memory found a really funny, or the way that she found a faster movement in the first room of level 2 was pretty funny because I
accidentally fell through a log, and nobody else has done it before, and it's like, is this just a thing? Oh, dang it, did it happen again? Did another game break on me accidentally again? Typical.
Please tell me you were recording a button file.
Oh, not only that, but it's in the task. Well, I deliberately triggered it later on because water speed was kind of faster for that.
Yeah, so water speed is a bit interesting because if you start swimming after just staying idle, you'll actually get speed faster than normal walking. However, if you keep pressing the directional button after a while, it will just set you back to a slower speed. But what you can do is you can alternate pressing the directional button maybe on every frame. I don't know how she did it, but basically you can prevent the game from setting you back at that slower speed, and you can just alternate going the faster speeds.
I think it's easier when you're in normal bonk state. I think all you have to do then is just jump or do a headbutt, and then you'll just keep the speed that way. In the level, in the screen, pretty much right after the conveyor belt screen is the one level in the game where it's convenient to use this crab transformation. The crab transformation you get by getting crushed. Bonk.
I saw that in the GDQ run. It looks so weird. And it's not very clear about how you lose the crab transformation. You sort of just
you
get
just take
hit
damage and then you get turned back to normal. And in that state, it's much more complicated to maintain speed underwater because you can't jump as much. There's no head bonking. So I had to kind of do this weird thing where I pressed right until I reached the point where I would go over the speed cap and then get reset back to the lowest speed. And then I would drop a little in speed and then start pressing right again. And then there's also this way where if you land on something, your speed temporarily freezes. So I abused that. So like, in addition to the pressing right thing, I also landed whenever possible on the highest speed, so it would freeze for a couple frames. And the inputs there are just a mess.
Is that high speed like a little bit over the speed cap or not?
It's like it's at the speed cap basically.
That is like so similar to Sonic 1 on the Master System. Very, very similar trick there. And I think there's a few games that will do stuff like that as well. Funny how they program it.
This also happens when you revert back to level 1 bonk, because like you know how you have like different levels depending on what meat you get.
If you press right, does it go down to level 1 speed straight away?
No, in fact, for some reason, when you're changing from level 1 to no power up level, instead for some reason you briefly get even more speed. Like you get
What
close
the heck?
to max speed, like max meat speed. You get close, but not quite. And if you abuse bunny hopping, etc., it can actually be beneficial to go from like level 1 meat to like no meat at all, just by abusing the higher speed of the transition using bunny hopping, air spinning, etc. That's really important in like I think the start of the beach stage and also at the very last of the final challenges right before the
So what would ever be the point of going to the higher level
higher
then?
level is even higher than that. It's just slightly. And
Okay.
it only works after like the transition boost, as I'll call it, only works like as like over like slowly like meat's power up levels slowly degrade over time. Like you go from level 3 to level 2 to level 1 to no to 0. Like over the course of however many seconds. And so you basically have to route it out so so if you're going to take advantage of the transition boost, you want to route it so that it happens as soon as possible in the stage.
Will that boost happen when you're going just from 1 to 0 or if you're going
Just
down
from 1
any
to
level?
0, not for any others. I don't know why. That was one of the things that was removed in Super Bonk that I dislike. Because that was actually pretty fun in Revenge.
Okay, and one thing we touched on a little bit earlier is Colin was talking about manipulating the meats. So I thought of them more like mushrooms in Mario as in being in set positions, but are they completely random where they can be?
Some are predetermined, some are not.
Mostly you get like that's really the only level where meat drops can be very RNG dependent. Otherwise, mostly you can just get meat drops from flowers.
Do they have RNG in it?
The
No, they
orange colored ones are always guaranteed to give you a meat of some sort. If you jump on it regularly, it's a small meat, but if you dive into it, it's a big meat.
well actually it depends on how fast you're laying on the flower. So like if you were because like if you're gonna dive down into the flower, like you're gonna go very fast. So that's how it picks it up. But if you were to like jump onto the flower from like a very high from very high and then land on it, you're obviously going to go to the fastest speed, so it's going to register as the big meat.
And other meats are just placed throughout the levels, like they're just out in the open.
Okay, yeah, because I was going to say if it's random, then the Taz would be a lot faster than RTA.
The other thing I actually wanted to mention was that RTA speedruns can be a bit slow, just due to like how because like you can
Bunny hopping
go.
is
Well,
one
yeah,
a
yeah.
frame
So
perfect input.
yeah, and the other thing is that sometimes when you're spinning in the air, you can accidentally bonk your head on the ground because when you bonk your head on the ground, bonks say
You are going to a complete stop.
yeah you stop for probably like 1 or 2 seconds, which wastes quite a bit of time. And actually, let me look up to see what the world record for this game is.
And that actually reminds me of something I forgot to bring up. So normally on the ground, you do a headbutt if you attack, but not if you're if you're level 2 or level 3. Instead, you spit fire. That's not very important for this engine, but it is for the other engine, and I'll get to why when that's relevant.
Okay, so the world record is 23 minutes and 37 seconds. And for comparison, the TAS is 17 minutes and 18 seconds, which is quite a bit of an improvement. Or I guess quite a bit of a difference.
What's the difference between practice, intermediate, and expert? Like, Taz has to play on expert because it's the hardest difficulty, but...
Yeah, so in this game...
Sorry, the amount of levels?
Practice, you do the minimal, you do some amount of levels. Intermediate, you do more levels. Expert is all of the levels.
Are the levels the same between all... Like, suppose you have to do level 1 in all 3. Is that the same no matter what difficulty you're playing on?
It is the exact same. It's not an actual like difficulty level. It's just like how much of the game you play. So a task for this game is obviously going to have to play the expert level because it shows off all the content.
One of the big differences between RTA and TAS is that bunny hopping involves the frame perfect input in the D-pad press when you land on the ground and the jump. Both of those pretty much have to be frame perfect, I think. The other thing is just crab speed manipulation is like impossible RTA more or less. It's like theoretically, oh, like you can get a little bit out of it, maybe, but it's very tricky. Like it's like only a frame window before you go back to before you hit that speed cap, and you'd have to be hitting it all. You'd have to be avoiding hitting it all the time.
The other thing that RTA does mostly is it tries very hard to get as many meats power ups as it can because obviously you're going to go the fastest speed or just at a faster walking speed than normal bonk. In a task though, we don't really have to do that because like in RTA you're always going to make mistakes. Like you're always going to like run into walls, which would lower the amount of meat time that you have. So in a task, like we can optimize it to always like get as far as we can with the meat power up that we have. Because otherwise, if we were to get every single meat on our way, then the cutscene that plays when you get a meat would definitely waste time.
The other thing is that meats also give you like an additional hit. It will take so while level 3 is invincible, level 2 if you get hit, you'll go down to level 1. Level 1 you get hit, you go down to level 0.
Yeah, you can only really take heart damage if you're level 0. And also, what's interesting is that the hearts are kind of not like each heart does not represent a single hit. Like it can represent, I think, like 3 or 4 different hits. Because all that really happens is that the heart will like get smaller. There are some enemies though that if you do get hit by them, like it will take a heart of damage, like a full actual container of a heart. But that doesn't really happen too much. I would say this game is fairly forgiving when it comes to damages, because it gives you a lot of health, and it also gives. The other thing is that a game over, or I guess like when you lose a life, like you don't get sent back to the beginning of the stage. You just kind of die, and you're in the area that you were in before for like a few seconds before like coming back alive, and he kind of takes a nap.
This game, does he take a nap? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. He's just kind of like, oops, I'm dead. All right, I'm back.
The game sounds very generous with health. Kind of reminds me of like Sonic's rings being generous as well, I guess.
Yeah, but if you do ever run out of lives, that's not good. That's really bad.
Is a game over just completely a game over?
It might be. I forget.
I've never gotten the game over.
But but at the very least, you have to restart the entire level. I do know that. At least that's true for Bonk 3.
I love how confident you were there, Colin. I've never gotten a game over.
Well, I mean, that's also because like I have kind of rarely played this game casually. I think.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
When
I think the only Bonk I played casually was actually 3.
Yeah. I think once I'm actually planning to probably take a look and maybe getting the TurboGrafx-16 Mini when it comes out, just because I want to support this console because I want it to be like more well known. Because I think it's really fun to play, and
yeah, certainly underrated.
Yeah. Also, I was trying to say earlier, I like how every single comparison that you make has to relate to Sonic.
No, it's just a coincidence, I promise. It did come out in like the same year, so.
So I mentioned before that Bonk 4, like Super Bonk, uses the same engine. So a lot of the tricks I've mentioned before were either nerfed or removed. Like, going from level 1 to level 0 no longer gives that speed boost. Levels 1 and 2 don't give any speed boost. Only level 3 gives a speed boost now. Bunny hopping, every time you bunny hop, you lose like 12 speed or something like that. Instead of 0. So, like, max meat speed is 640, so every time you land is like, now it's like 628, 616, something like that.
You know, one thing I also I think I forgot to mention was that you can actually go max speed as level 0 Bonk if you're in an ice level. So you can actually like walk on, like, I think it's the third level in the game. It's like a snowy level or ice level, and like even on certain like slopes that are a bit icy, you can actually like get up to full speed on them. Either that or
Ice is pretty interesting in the Bonk series in general. It's more interesting in the other engine, in my opinion, but it's still cool in the Revenge engine. Pun unintended.
Yeah. One other thing about bosses in general, your position and when you finish the bosses also matters a lot because after you defeat a boss, Bonk will
mainly. Well, it differs depending on where you fight the boss. Like you fight all the bosses once, and then you get a rematch at the end of the game, sort of like Mega Man style.
Yeah. So the way that so every time you defeat a boss, Bonk will like do a little dance, and then he'll jump up in the air and then land at a certain position on the screen. It's usually best to position Bonk in a way where he is doing that animation as fast as possible. So, like, you don't want to be you don't want to really be in the air too high after he kills an enemy. Otherwise, he'll take longer to fall down into the position he used to.
Yeah, but there, that was actually something I found over you, was that you actually want him to be like a little higher than you'd think. Like, it's weirdly variable, like what height Bonk stops at, and it depends on where you are when you defeat the boss. I think like the key height was like 99 or something, because then you like end up at like you end up jumping for the least amount of time.
Oh, okay.
Like, but that was mainly for the rematches.
Yeah. And the other thing is that uh, when you actually like leave the screen, you want to have Bonk be as far right as possible, because as soon as he hits the end of the screen, then the level will end. So there's a few spots where like as soon as we beat the boss, we have to like try to move as far right as possible. Some bosses you can actually like finish the fight like immediately on the right side of the screen. Like I think the first and the third or fourth. No, it was the fourth boss that you can do that. But for the rematches, like all that you really need to do is like focus on the jump height, because Blanc does not leave the screen on the right side. Instead, he just like floats up in the air.
Yeah, I'd imagine that would play into a bit of the strategy as you're fighting the bosses. Is there much RNG with the boss movement, or is it fairly
Yeah,
predictable with what they do?
Yeah, a lot of the bosses are. Most of the RNG in this game involves the bosses, and that was kind of the reason why Memory wanted me to do the bosses when she was improving everything, because she just couldn't get the same results as I could.
though there was like a couple of exceptions for a couple of fairly simple fights, like the rematch at the end of the game against the twirly ballerina dinosaur. That one I did mostly because one, like I was able to set up the perfect height for jumping, and two, I was able to set up the perfect jump for like for the jump at the end of the fight. And on that fight, I set up like a transition, like I set it up so that the meat timer would run out just as I'm starting this really long horizontal stage. So I would get the transition boost and like go through um that set the next segment at a really high speed.
Oh, that's awesome. Does that cost you any time in the previous stage, or is it just routing?
It's just routing. Like I intentionally take a hit because I
Ah,
know that like I'm not going to get like a full meat in that next stage. Like a full meat would be ideal, but it wasn't happening. So the idea was, all right, set up a meat transition boost as soon as possible in that next area.
that'd be pretty difficult. Like all of your levels seeping into each other in the TAS, affecting each other like that.
The worst part of it is that in this game, in most in like this game in Bonk 1, like both versions of Bonk 1, subpixels do transfer over between screens, but
Yeah,
not
that's rough.
but um not like regular position, just the subpixels.
So that kind of leads into my next question. Is the game, if you discount all the meat timers and boss RNG, is the game sync friendly?
Not really. You have to do a bit of adjustment every time.
Yeah. Okay.
That's why we pretty much had to go through the entirety of the game. Like whenever we found an improvement. Well, thankfully we both did it in order the entire time. So like we kept finding additional improvements like each iteration and yeah,
So were you each comparing like level by level, or did you only come together at the very end to see?
mostly level by level. There was enough time saves in each iteration that we could pretty much almost always like save a little bit of time each time, like a couple exceptions.
Yeah, and you'd be getting better at the physics as well and stuff. So it's always worth redoing it if you can. Is there much else to talk about with Bonk 2? Like any other mechanics in there that are worth noting?
So in the game, there's like these smiley power-ups. Like there's these smiley items placed throughout the level. If you get enough of them, you can get a warp, but it's not worth it in this game. However, in Super Bonk, which is based off of Bonk 2, it is worth getting them because at the end of Super Bonk, there's like there's a really long auto scroller. Unfortunately, you can't skip the auto scroller, but you can get enough smileys in it to like skip the next stage or something. I don't know too much about Super Bonk, but I believe that's right.
So,
Colin, have you?
so the warp skips a stage.
I don't remember doing too much research on smileys in Superbunk, but from what I understand, the smileys are kind of useless in that game because it's only used for like one area, and that's what I heard. I never really looked farther into it. I think it's just like to get a certain upgrade, which I don't know if it's really useful in a speedrun. But again, I honestly have no idea. That's all I know about the smileys in Super Bonk is that they have some sort of use, but compared to the other Bonk games, they're pretty much useless.
So what do they do if you get enough? They skip a stage or something.
Mostly, like as far as the PCE versions, they just like allow you to play like bonus games, which
I thought that it was different for each one.
yeah,
Like
I think so too.
Revenge, in Revenge, I think it's the skip a stage thing, but it's just not worth it.
I don't think that. No, I'm pretty sure it's like if you collect one smiley, like it allows you to play a bonus level after you beat a boss. Like I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Because I remember that we tried
Then
very hard to.
Space saw it because I read that into thread, something like that into thread.
Yeah, because I'm
mixing things up.
Yeah, because I remember that we tried very hard to not collect any at all, and which was actually very easy because you don't really encounter very many smileys in that game. There's only like a few places where we have to like purposely avoid them. Like I think the other waterfall level, like at the very last area where you have to do the damage boost off the flies. Like I think there was one point where I was struggling to like get past a certain smiley in the area because we like barely miss it in our tasks.
That reminds me more of Bonk 1 actually.
Interesting. But yeah, smileys are kind of they can either be useful or just screw you over in a speedrun.
Seems so funny that you have to intentionally avoid them and they're supposed to be like a good item.
I mean, there's a lot of games like that. Like Pepsi Man comes to mind, where you have to like avoid as many cans as possible so the counter doesn't take up most of the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Toto World 3 on the Master System is another example of that. But then you got Crash 1 as well, where you want to get as many boxes as possible.
Well, if you're doing,
but not all of them.
Well, if you're doing 100%.
Well, if you're doing 100%, you want all of them. But if you're not, I'm assuming the counter's like slightly faster.
Well,
yeah, because it drops each box on Crash's head that you missed.
Yeah, well, I think in the PlayStation 1...
Unless you're on the Japanese version.
Yeah, because I think on Japanese, like, you can press a button that skips the entire animation.
Well, in Japanese, it just drops one on his head.
Oh.
And it just says how many you missed. But on the US and PAL version, it drops every single box on your head.
That really is some of the point. Yeah.
But on the US and PAL version, you can also like skip that whole animation by dying in the level. So it's always a toss up about which is faster. Yeah,
I love seeing Crash die in his games because they're just so comical.
It seems that a lot of the categories in Crash games have him dying a lot, like Crash 2 and Game Over abuse as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting about that.
All right.
Is there much else to talk about with? Oh, sorry, you go on.
No, that's what I was going to say. Like, I don't think there's really much else we have to say about Bonks 2, unless Memory has anything to say.
All right. So Bonk 1, Bonk's Adventure. So you two also did the TAS for this? I'm just going to double check
I
this.
have not done the test for that. The only Bonk game I did was Revenge, so I'm kind of less knowledgeable on this here.
I've done solo every bonk except for Revenge. Like the rest are all me, pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. So 1 and 3 is more your territory there, memory.
So there's a big difference right away with Bonk 1 compared to Revenge. In Bonk's Revenge, your max walking speed was like 360 or something, and like there's like there's a bunch of iterations in between that. And Bonk 1 is 4. Speed works completely differently. Like there's a lot less little variations between speed and the Bonk 1 engine.
Can you have sub-pixel speed, like 4 point something, or just not at all?
It's not. I don't think speed is like strictly like tied to like pixel movement. It's like a speed level of sorts.
Okay. So speed is not like your change in exposition per frame.
I don't think so.
I'm just going to quickly interject, just because since I don't know this game as well, I think I'm done here.
No worries, Colin. Yeah, we won't keep you. Can you remind everyone where they can find you before you leave?
Yeah. So on Twitter, my @ is EZGames69. No capitals, no spaces. I don't think Twitter keeps track of capital letters. So
They don't.
Guess they'll find out. Thanks, Memory.
Yeah. And my YouTube is I don't know the actual URL, but it's just EZGames _ There's no 69. You can also find me on Discord. I'm usually pretty active in the TAS Videos Discord. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I should probably start linking that Discord in the show notes, actually.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah, I might do that.
All right. That's probably going to be it for me. Have fun, you two.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for coming on, Colin. It's always very fascinating to hear about it. And yeah, nice to see how passionate you are about the series as well as you are, Memory.
I think Memory's more passionate about it than I am, though.
Well, it's for all the Bonk kids.
Well, all of them except the ones I don't feel like doing. Like, I don't feel like doing Super Bonk. I don't feel like doing the Game Boy Bonks.
I don't feel like doing it.
All the Bonk 3 and earlier Bonk kids, then.
Yeah.
Bonk kids rise up. All right. That's it for me. See you later, guys.
No worries. Thanks again, Colin.
Oh, goodbye.
Have a good one. Alright, where were we on Bonk 1 and 3?
Alright, so speed, like, there's a lot less variation between it. So one thing is that every time you land, assuming you're above speed 3, you get reset to speed 3 if you land on the ground. That's pretty important throughout, because that means, 1, you want to avoid landing. Well, unless you land on your head, then you will end up at speed 0.
Well, yeah, you're never going to want that. Is there, like, can you eat meat to get more speed in Bonk 1 as well, or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Only the level 3 gives you speed in that one, and it gives you 6 speed. However, there's an even better method of getting speed in Bonk 1, and that is bonking off a flower bud. In Bonk 2, if you do a headbutt on a flower bud, you will pick it up on your head, and you can toss it around. Not the case in Bonk 1 and Bonk 3. In those games, if you headbutt a flower bud from the side, you recoil off it, and that gives you 7 speed.
Oh, wow.
And so the key there is to then jump to extend it, and then start spinning in order to keep the speed, and hopefully bounce off enemies or do damage boost to just keep the speed through the entirety of the level, more or less. In Bonk 1, the level layouts are a lot more are very horizontal for the most part. Only a couple of them are vertical. So like half the game you're just going to the right at the flower boost speed.
And how common are these flower buds
Very
to have
common.
in the levels?
Very common and sometimes very early.
Hmm.
Um
Do you ever get meat in that TAS or not?
yes. Um some cases it's not early enough, or sometimes it just doesn't line up. So one thing is that I mentioned before, every time you land, you get reset to speed 3. That that means if you land at all, your flower boost speed is gone. So sometimes you just have to land. And the advantage of meats is that you could keep like you can quickly build back up to speed 6. So if you need to, you can just use the like, and also meat gives you a higher jump, which can be important.
Do you ever combine the meat speed with the flower speed and kind
Um,
of get a higher jump
it
to get
only
further?
yeah, I do that in like in the second screen of the game. I think I I use both. The important thing is that like, but obviously the animation for the meat takes longer, so I there's not as much meat involvement in Bonk 1, but sometimes I do use it, and if it's like sometimes it's just your only option.
Yeah, so it wouldn't give you more than 7 speed, obviously, but having the meat would help you stay in the air longer after the flower, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's cool.
Um, there's a couple other methods of getting speed. Like I think bouncing off of on top of a flower, like dirty spring flowers that make you jump really high, and that they will allow you to get up to speed 5, which is slightly higher than max walking speed. So sometimes to take advantage of that. Clouds will give you speed 5. I think Vine, swinging from Vine will give you speed 6, or was it 5? I don't remember. Uh, another key thing is that, but there's a different advantage to meats in this game. Meat, for each level of meat, you do double damage. So at level 3, you do like 8 times the damage or something.
Wow, so I take it you're stocking up for bosses then?
Well, a lot of the time there's not a meat close by, so but it's really important for the level 2 boss because that boss has like long animations between phases and between attacks where it's vulnerable. So I think like the way I do it, like the first encounter, you just do 2 hits or something and then you're done. And it's really important because the animations take forever.
Is there ever a situation where the bosses sort of, like, the devs wouldn't expect you to beat a boss so soon and it causes weird effects because you have meat at
Not
that
quite,
point?
not quite, but I'm pretty sure there's at least one situation in the test where I don't think they expected me to get a meat when I did. And that is at the very end.
Yeah.
There's like a big meat uh, right before the boss rush, and I just barely make it in time so that I get a little bit of meat left over for the second boss, which is the one with the really long animations. And that's how I save time by grabbing that meat because it's actually a little bit of a detour, but it's like just barely fast enough that I can get to the second boss and then skip a little bit of downtime.
Hmm. Yeah. So it's pretty good that you can do the second boss both times with meat. It's sort of like in my brain reminding me of Cuphead. I'm not sure if you've seen speedruns of that, but they beat the bosses so quickly that it messes up all of their cycles and glitches out their behavior. I guess the bosses' cycles may not be that complicated in this game,
No,
but
This game in general is much less complicated than the others, especially in terms of level design, and even the boss behavior is not that complicated.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think many games from 1990 would have super complicated bosses.
The other way of getting speed in this engine involves ice. Ice in the Bonk 1 engine is really cool. So, one thing is that if you do an air spin and then land on the ground, it doesn't matter if you do a dive or air spin and then land face up, no matter what, you'll start slipping on the ice. However, that that slipping lets you go at speed 5, which is slightly faster than walking. However, to cancel out of that slipping, you have to press like 1 and left, and then Bonk stays still for a really long time while he stops slipping. So the only time I abuse it is when I'm about to go off a ledge. Because then I don't have to stop slipping. Because if you're slipping, you can't jump. So if I just go off a ledge, then it doesn't matter.
Okay, but even compared to some of the other stuff, like a 5 doesn't seem as good as the 6 you would get from the meat
But,
or 7 you'd get from a flower.
no, but then there are ice slopes. And in ice slopes, as long as the longer you go down an ice slope, the more speed you build up. Wait, I think the max I get in this task is 9 off of a ice slope.
Wow, I'm amazed the game knows how to interpret that correctly, actually.
There's another. The ice level in general is what led me to think that I could improve that task. Before I found out about the big skip, that was found after the task was made. Like there were just a bunch of little sloppy movements in the ice level that I felt could be improved.
That's often a sign of like underlying things, like maybe a lot more can be improved then if you can see it on a macro scale.
Yeah, like once like he had to like do this stopping slipping animation thing and went through it in its entirety, and I felt it could be done a lot better. And I found a way to skip that entirely.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I think there's probably a lot of stuff that original author found as well that helped you, but it's like several years later, new tools and having two brains looking at it rather than one really does help you squeeze out those
Well,
frames.
this was pretty much entirely me at this point.
Mm.
Bonk,
I mean, like you and the original author, like they
yeah,
may have found some tech or something.
the SDA run actually found like a pretty big skip it in the towards the end of the game. So there's this one really long and slow water level where you have to like go all the way to the right, then go up a little, and then go back all the way to the left. In the PCE version, it's possible to just skip all of that by jumping over the wall at the start. Like there's like you
Wow.
fall into the water level, and then you could just jump over to the right onto the top of the wall, and then go straight to the end of the segment since
That's
it's right next to the
hilarious.
start. That's always fun when you like they have like an exit right next to the start, and they don't expect you to get to it that easily.
Yep, Land of Illusion. So, why do you say specifically the PCE version there?
Because in the NES version, that area is actually two different screens, so you can't do that skip.
So, is the NES version actually like a, well, I want to say a port of the
It's
original, but
more or less
like,
it's kind of a port, except there's actually some changes that resemble Bonk 3 in a way. Like some changes, like some mechanics actually resemble Bonk 3 a little more. Damage boosting works a little more like Bonk 3. Waterfalls work a lot more like Bonk 3. Like in Bonk in the original PCE version, if you get hit by an enemy and you're moving, you will continue moving at that speed, but you'll get set full, like you'll sort of like get a jump in the air. It's actually higher than like if you intentionally bounce off them. Like if you dive into them and do a bounce, like it's higher than that, but it depends on which side of the enemy it's on. Like if you get hit by the enemy on the left side, you get sent left. If you get hit on the right side, you get sent right at the same speed. So I in some cases I intentionally get hit on the right side of the enemy, and that will allow me to keep like flower speed for longer.
Yeah, that's clever.
But in the NES version, you just lose all speed if you get hit by an enemy. Same for
So does that mean that the PC version was more fun to TAS, or are there other benefits to the NES version?
like there's some difference. I generally prefer the PCE version, but there were some fun things about the NES version. There's not as much of a cooldown between attacking in the NES version. So like the best way to deal damage is to repeatedly bounce on the enemy's head. In NES, there isn't a cooldown for that, and one boss doesn't have any invincibility frames. So you just repeatedly just drain its health by attacking over and over. It's like the second to last boss.
Yeah, that would be very satisfying.
So I also like that boss in the PCE version because I have a different way of getting around that. Um, there's this attack it does that shoots like throws ninja stars at you, and I hit them from below. So bonk, like after each attack, I hit them from below. So like when I'm going up, I get bonk gets interrupted by hitting the ninja star from below, so I could go down again faster.
Okay.
I also do something
Right. Yeah,
similar.
that's cool.
I also do something similar in one of the bosses in Bonk 3. I intentionally
Mm.
keep these enemies that the boss spawns alive, so I get hit, like I hit them from below, and then I can attack the boss again sooner. So one thing you can do in the Bonk 1 engine is repeatedly bounce off of enemies that you've already defeated. Like, so when you bounce off an enemy, like sometimes like it'll go up in the air with you. It'll flip upside down, and depending on how much health it has, if it lands, it'll still be alive, or sometimes it'll just disappear, depending on when it hits the ground. One thing you can do in the Bonk 1 engine is use a corpse, basically, like just repeatedly bounce off of a corpse before it hits the ground, so you use the same corpse to get more height. Like you bounce off of it once, it
Okay.
goes in the air, then you bounce off it a second time to get more height.
Can you bounce off of it if it's already hit the ground or not?
Nope. Once it hits, well, it depends. If it still has health, yes, because then it just starts acting as normal, like it's alive. If it hits the ground when the enemy has no more health, it just disappears.
Okay.
And there's a couple parts in Bonk 1 and in both versions of Bonk 1 and in Bonk 3 where I bounce off of the same enemy repeatedly.
Is that something that might happen RTA, or is that like a little bit too
It's a little
precise?
precise, but it probably could. Depends.
So it wouldn't be outrageous if, like, casually you bounce twice off an enemy's head
Yeah.
that add 1 health. Yeah.
It's especially useful in Bonk Nests because in Bonk PCE, if you repeatedly press jump while climbing like in order to climb a waterfall, you have to repeatedly press jump. But every so often, he'll like do this jump, and that will give like a lot more vertical speed compared to just slowly climbing up the waterfall. However, that's not the case in every other Bonk since. So, including Ness. So in Ness, one thing I did was just repeatedly bonk off the same dead enemy for like this giant waterfall segment.
Wow. I can't believe that's actually faster as well.
Oh yeah, well, climbing up the waterfall is really slow without jumps.
I'm kind of imagining like Mario 64 swimming when you're saying that. Like sometimes you get a really big jump out of the water.
That actually reminds me. Now I remember what I was going to say that I missed. All right, so in water works completely differently compared to Revenge. So the key thing in this engine is that as long as you don't trigger swimming, like there's like a specific swimming animation that you can do by with the D-pad. You really don't want to do that in the Bonk 1 engine because it will reset your speed to 3. So the key there is to just control your height with jumps and dives, and that way you'll keep your speed whatever it was before.
And you're once again holding neutral there.
Yeah.
It's strange how you wouldn't lose your speed from holding neutral. I haven't seen many games that are like that.
It's that thing is that if you press a direction on the D-pad, you'll trigger the swimming motion, and that
Yeah, and like hit the speed cap.
it's not so much a speed cap. It's just that it completely changes your movement type. Like
Okay.
swimming is a completely different movement type.
Yeah.
But if you don't enter that swimming speed, you just move at the normal speed, at whatever speed you were going before. Sometimes it's like beneficial to like do a flower boost and then intentionally land in the water because that makes it really easy to just maintain speed. Because then you can just jump
Hmm.
whenever or dive whenever you need to.
Yeah, that is clever. Usually water's not that beneficial, but there you go.
One more thing. In Bonk 1, the highest level does not replace your main attack on the ground. So you can still. So in Bonk 2, you breathe fire at max meat level. In Bonk 1, you don't. You still do the headbutt, which is important because otherwise you couldn't do the flower boosting.
Yeah, that is good. How convenient.
However,
Um,
transitioning to Bonk 3, levels 2 and 3 do in fact breathe fire, so you can no longer do the flower boosting if you're at levels 2
oh.
and 3.
Why level 2 and 3?
Level 1 still has the headbutt, but like you shoot a little star from your head instead. In level 3 is level 2 and 3. Level 2 and 3 have the same like bonk like shape, like Bonk's butthead bonk at level 2 and 3.
So how does the game justify changing the mechanics like that?
Well, for the most part, it wouldn't matter. It's just only if you're trying to go fast where it does. Because why would you need to recoil off of a flower from the side? Casually, it would probably like annoy you just like getting set flying when you're trying to get an item, a critical item from a flower.
Yeah, that is true. That's probably why they did it, to be annoying in the first place.
Oh, one weird thing about flower boosting, you can only hit a flower on every other frame. I don't know why, but it's a thing in Bonk 1 in the Bonk 1 engine. So every other frame You just miss.
Okay, so you don't like go a little bit in and then hit it on the next frame.
So the key thing is to um get as far as you can before on that frame roll. So if say frame 1 I would miss. So then I try to land a little bit further to the right so that I can hit it on frame 2 the first frame possible, but make frame 2 the first frame possible, but still be a little further right rather than just waiting there for a frame.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It would make it nicer to optimize, I suppose, being on those frame rules. Although I guess when you got like a frame rule every 2 frames, you don't really have much to play with.
Yeah, though Bonk 3, the spinning speed possible is a bit slower compared to Bonk 1. So your hover is not quite as strong, but there's still flower boosting and stuff. And it introduces a bunch of mechanics from Bonk 2, but it does them in the Bonk 1 engine, which has some interesting repercussions. Like, so for levels, now I have to choose between meats or flowers, pretty much, because of the fire breathing. And however, Bonk 3
Yeah.
title is Bonk's Big Adventure. So that means in Bonk 3 they introduce a new mechanic entirely, which is these candies which change your size. There's these candies that make Bonk really huge and candies that make Bonk really small. If you have one of those active and then touch a meat, you skip the animation for the meat.
Okay, so you're trying to do this a lot in the TAS then? I'd imagine that's pretty overpowered.
Yeah. So so half the task is spent in small, pretty much. Because it's just you because there's one shortcut at the beginning of the game that's only possible when small. And the RTA didn't even realize it was there, which was kind of a thing. But
Do the shortcuts like skip levels, or do they just go to different spots in the same level?
different spots in the same level. Normally, you'd have to go down and around this ship, but here it just lets you go straight through it.
Yeah. It's always funny when like something intentional like that gets overlooked by speedrunners, even though they find all this other crazy tech. I had that in Land of Illusion recently as well.
Here, basically, I I almost rerouted the entire thing from scratch. I used the least amount of prior work in Bonk 3 compared to Bonk 1 and 2. Like the there's there was one section in Bonk 1 which I actually had a lot of trouble just matching the previous task. But not the case in Bonk 3. There was no prior work put into it, basically. Nobody knew it was even Bonk 1 engine. So it was pretty much like the only fresh Bonk for me.
Yeah, because there wasn't even a TAS, and there's like one run on speedrun.com.
And that one run had some issues, like when it came to routing. They went really out of their way for extra lives. And at one point, they go for an extra life, but accidentally end up triggering this bonus minigame instead first. So they have to go all the way through the bonus minigame and then get the extra life.
Wow. So, like, you're making the TAS of that now. How far through are you, do you reckon?
I'm basically done, but I'm polishing it up. I'm still finding little places here and there where I can shave frames. One important thing about Bonk 3 is that, as I mentioned before, it does use some mechanics from Bonk 2. One of the mechanics is wall jumping. In Bonk 2, if you wall jump, you just go max whatever meat speed you're at. So, like, if it's no meat, then you go max walk speed. If it's max meat, then it's max meat speed. In Bonk 3, it it goes to speed 5, which is slightly faster than walking. So the key there is like the levels design is a lot more complicated than in Bonk 1, so I can't just rely on flowers to just fly across the entire stage. It's a lot more vertical, a lot more zigzaggy. So oftentimes I just wall jump of things to get speed. And that includes just walking off of a ledge, turning around in midair, and then wall jumping immediately.
Oh, I love it when games are like that. They need more of them.
The the thing is, whenever you walk off of a ledge, it resets your speed to 0, which makes wall jumping really easy because then you could just immediately turn around and then do a wall jump. It's not as fast as
Hmm.
meat or as flower boosting, but it it's really handy, and it's part of why Bonk 3 is my favorite because like I don't see walls, I see speed boosters.
Yeah. Wow. Um, I remember doing some sort of game where, like, yeah, every corner you could actually gain a little boost off of. It was, yeah, and it can be quite hard. I've found as well if you've got a game like that. Sometimes you may even forget. You just see like a ledge or something, and you forget to do that wall jump thing on one of them. I'm not sure if you've run into that yet, or
N- not not too much. Ledges, like once at first I wasn't the biggest fan of passing Bonk 3. Like the first stage was alright, but it's like this feels kind of like a gimped Bonk 1 because as I mentioned before, the hovering is a bit slower. Like you can't hover as fast. Like you can't like press the attack button as fast. So you drop a lot quicker. But then level 2 happened and I'm like, "Oh, wall jumping's really broken in this game." All right.
well, who knows? Maybe you could find something in the SNES bonk and make that fun.
I have my doubts, especially because that is the only one with an really long auto score.
Yeah.
The other thing is that one important trick is actually getting in between speeds, like in between amounts of hovers. So like you can hover, like you can press the attack button as fast as possible, and like you'll get, and like your speed, your vertical speed will be reset each time. However, there's sometimes where you want to go a little further, but adding an extra hover will make you go too far. So what I do throughout the task is I actually intentionally space out the inputs so that I get just a little extra distance before like I reset the speed. And that's
Okay. What, like,
optimize. Like normally it's like 6 and 6 or 9 and 6 if you have meat, but sometimes you want to do like 7 and 7, and that'll make you go a little further. But sometimes, like if you hover, like sometimes like you just want a little extra speed to land on a specific spot. Like in the Bonk One engine, if you like, there's like a line at the end of each stage where if you land on that land, if you're walking on that line, it'll trigger the next. It'll trigger the end of the screen. But if you're in the air, it won't trigger. So you want to land just on that line.
so you're fine tuning your height with the hover to try and control exactly where you're landing.
And sometimes adding an extra hover will just result in you landing with your head on the ground. Because that's how the timing worked out. So I
Oh,
spaced out my inputs then as well.
Yeah. That'd be very hard to notice on a macro scale too.
Another thing is that because of the wall jumps, the ice slipping thing becomes even better, where I mentioned before in Bonk 1, if you do an air spin and then land on ice, you start slipping. And I only do that off of ledges. Now, if I go off of a ledge, I can then immediately follow up with a wall jump.
Oh, nice. So, what in Bonk 1 you couldn't even preserve your ice speed. You had to lose it when you went off the ledge.
Yeah.
But in Bonk 3 you can follow it up. You do lose it, but you get the 5 speed from a wall jump then.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's really cool.
And
it's good that it's not too OP with the wall jumps either.
Yeah. Bonk 3, I feel like, strikes that perfect balance between Bonk 1 and Bonk 2. It has a lot of the cool Bonk 1 tech, like flower boosting and all that, but it has a lot more complicated level design, which make things a lot more interesting. Like, it has Bonk 2 style levels.
Yeah, no, it does sound like a good mix. Shame that the physics got a bit nerfed, but what can you do, really?
It more than made up for it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
About the candy thing, I use small for the majority of the game. However, there's only one disadvantage to small, and that is that you jump less high.
So does the size carry over between levels and stuff?
Yes.
Okay. So why not use big?
Big, you hover slower. It's barely hovering, pretty much. And it's just a lot awkward to maneuver. I use it once at the very end of the game for a shortcut.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess. Yeah.
Why
don't you?
One occasion where, so the only times I do get meats, I'm obviously small for the most part, because that allows me to skip the animation. I only want to do it if there's a lot of back and forth or just not any flowers available. However, there's one stage at the end of the game where I do not want to be small when I collect meat. There's a reason for that. The reason is, if you are small or big, it will, when you get hit by an enemy, it will take away your size before it will affect your power-up level. So if I want to get rid of power-up level 2, which is important because in power-up level 2, I cannot flower boost. So there's one time I go through the animation just because I want to be able to get rid of power-up level 2 in the next stage.
So can you not get the meat and then lose small?
You would have to get hit twice.
Okay, yeah. And
that was slower than getting hit once. But going through the animation. There's also an animation for getting shrunken and getting and growing, but it's a lot shorter than the animation for grabbing the meat. It's a couple frames compared to the meat, which is a second. So
you'd only have to see it once, really.
So it's mostly worth it to grab the candies, but not in that one case.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like they added a lot more intricacies to play with. It sounds like a pretty interesting one. Is it much longer than the other games in the series? Because I noticed the speedrun was longer.
Not at all. It's actually, well, the record was 45 minutes. It's shorter than, the task is shorter than Bonk 1 PCE.
Wow.
But longer than Revenge.
Okay.
Alright, the one problem with Bonk 1, there's a bunch of cutscenes at the end of the game. Actually, there's a bunch of cutscenes, period, but there's these slow cutscenes after every boss, and then there's a slow cutscene before the boss rush, not bonk rush. There's not as many cutscenes in 2 or 3, and there's some that are skippable in 2.
I take it you have to do an input after the cutscenes at the end of Bonk 1.
No. But actually, that reminds me of the one thing I missed about Bonk 1. In Bonk 1, you actually do want to get one smiley at the end of each level. So, smileys in Bonk 1 restore your health at the end of each stage. How normally you would think, oh, that that's time that's wasted because it has to wait for it to refill the health before it can end the stage. However, if you get only one smiley, the health refill, triggers the end round screen a little later, but somehow the end round screen is actually shorter with one smiley compared to 0. So
Why does that happen?
I'm not quite sure. I'm guessing it's just due to how the music looped or something. I don't remember, but it just happened to be the fastest is to grab one smiley each stage that has a standard stage end. The last level, of course, it doesn't matter how many you get because after you beat that boss, it's the end.
Yeah, that would have occurred to me because I don't usually listen to the music when tazzing, so that's interesting.
But in Bonk 3, smileys are used for mini games afterwards. It doesn't matter how many you have, you always go to that menu, so it doesn't matter if you have smileys or not in Bonk 3.
So at least you don't have to avoid them, I suppose.
Yeah, you don't have to avoid them, but it's a quick input to just skip the mini games. Like, you basically you can save and spend smileys for mini games for chances for lives.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that good. Not in a Taz.
But you have to go to that menu no matter how many smileys, so it doesn't ends up not mattering whether you have them or not. The other thing
Yeah, it's
about
convenient.
Bonk 3 is that bosses are a bit weird. So Bonk actually has 2 hitboxes in this game when you do an attack in midair. One, he does this when he's flipping. He does this attack to the side that does 1 damage, and then he does a downwards one, which is then he starts diving, which is 2 if you land on an enemy. The key to optimizing boss fights is to get both of those. So I have to hit the corner of the hitbox of each boss. So I get the first one and then immediately land on the boss and get the second hit.
Do you have to wait for the boss's iframes, or can you actually get both in?
Most bosses don't have iframes.
Okay, that's convenient.
Though I do have to do a little bit of extra flipping in order to get that second hit. So it's like slightly the rate at which I'm doing damage is like slightly slower, but because I'm doing 3 damage instead of 2, it ends up faster. But
Yeah.
sounds
And are the boss itself low enough that you could, based on the odd and evenness, doing 3 is a big deal?
yeah. Though sometimes bosses move, and if they are moving, then it could be impossible to get that like 3 damage instead of 2. And since I'm tiny for most of the game, I really want to avoid getting hit because that'll cause an animation where I can't do anything.
Okay. Is it easier to like maneuver around the boss's hitboxes and stuff when you're tiny as well?
I don't think it really matters too much, but it probably helps a little. It just works out that
Cool.
it's faster to be tiny most of the game, anyways.
That makes sense if you're skipping the meat animation there.
Yeah. Let me think. There's one other thing I was supposed to say. Oh yes. Waterfalls in this game. Normally, you repeatedly press the jump button to climb them, and it's really slow. However, if you exit the waterfall from the side, Bonk will do a jump. So the key is to like repeatedly jump out in and out of the waterfall from the side to get height.
Oh, I imagine that'd look pretty fast in the TAS. Are there
Yeah,
many waterfalls in the game?
not too many, but it like I discovered this like in like World 5 of like 7 or something like that. Like there's like not many more waterfalls where it's required until then.
Did you have to go back and redo any
Nope.
when you
No,
discovered it, or no?
no.
Oh, that's
There,
good.
there just wasn't any waterfalls to that point. At least not any that it mattered.
Yeah.
Like I skipped them for various other ways.
It's definitely frustrating if you like discover something and then have to go back and redo everything you've already done.
Though that has happened recently in a different way. I found out that a different set of so I mentioned before you can walk off of a ledge and immediately do a wall jump. I found out that there's a different set of inputs to do it, which sometimes give you one extra pixel, but only sometimes depending
So
on your like position and stuff.
have you gone back and got all those extra pixels?
I'm working on that now.
Nice. So does that mean this game is more sync friendly, or are you actually going to have to redo?
Absolutely. I think it either resets the subpixels or something, but it is incredibly sync friendly compared to the others.
Man, Bonk 3 is looking pretty good.
I, the re-record count is higher than every other Bonk as well, but Ness. And that was because Ness was my first, so I was like mostly clueless.
So what's the re-record count sitting at now?
It's like 1100. I mean, not 1100. 100 110,000 or something like that.
Wow. That's pretty intense for like a 20-minute 2D game. Cool. So when are you expecting it to be finished up, all these minor improvements by?
Not sure. Soon, hopefully, but not sure.
And are you gonna... So like, you're submitting it to TAS videos, I take it, when it's done?
After Frame Fatale, I submitted it to Frame Fatale and it got in. So so
Oh,
so the
congratulations.
first showing of it will be at the marathon.
So is there like a link or something that I can put in there for people to check it out?
Not not, not this one yet. Well, the marathon will be hosted on the Games Done Quick channel, but I could probably link the marathon schedule.
Yeah, that'd be cool. If you could message me that schedule, then people can have a look in the show notes and check out when it is and stuff. It's not that often that you see TAS showings at marathons.
That's one
You know,
thing
in
I've
any.
been like specifically wanting to do. Like partly like I've been wanting to show like one complaint some people have about task showings and marathons is that oh you could just look it up on YouTube beforehand. Well, not if it's not even on YouTube beforehand.
Yeah, definitely. That is a problem, but it's the commentary that you do it for, I think.
Yeah, But I also
Watching TASs can be a bit bland if you're not sure what's going on as well.
I think Bonk's relatively straightforward to watch. It's mostly clear what's going on, aside from the
Oh yeah, I mean in general, of
yeah
course, but
the double hit thing
this is
in on
self-explanatory.
bosses. You'll have no idea it's happening if I didn't tell you.
Yeah, a lot of TASs are like that. A lot of subtle things you have no idea what's happening. So when is this marathon? So it will have to be done before then, obviously.
I remember it's in August. I forget the exact dates off the top of my head. Since I was having problems with my mic beforehand, I'm a little nervous to open up any programs that aren't necessary.
No worries. Yeah. Well, we'll have the schedule in the show notes anyway.
Yeah. I remember it's like end of August, like August 25th or something like that. I forget.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll look forward to catching it and seeing it on TAS videos, of course.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if anyone happens to be listening around then, they can always go and vote on TAS videos or check out the marathon run or something along those lines. Was there anything else you wanted to cover with them, or anything else in general?
Oh, the other thing, I really, really like Boxy's music. Probably my favorite of the bunch when it comes to music, especially the final boss. Like the final boss is like, all right, so the final boss was almost really good casually. Almost. There's one problem, and that is that the hitboxes are kind of buggy. But the concept is amazing. So, as I mentioned before, in this game, Bonk can change size. The final boss changes size. And that's like the gimmick. Is like you face these different forms, and like some of them are tiny, some of them are huge. And
Do you have to change size along with it as well?
no. There's no power-ups in bosses. But I still find it really cool whenever like a final boss like takes the central mechanic of the game and turns it against you or something. I really love it when games do that. I just wish that the hitboxes were a bit better.
Yeah. Well, people will remember the concept rather than the hitboxes, I think, when they play it.
I remembered the hitboxes.
Well, you're a Tazza, though.
Honestly, it was less frustrating in the task than it was in casual.
Yeah, definitely. But you don't realize how bad some hitboxes are when you're Tazzing, because you just like try and inch closer and closer until it works, I suppose.
Oh, one thing about the final boss. I accidentally ended up mooning it. I showed it my ass. That was completely by accident, but I'm leaving it in.
Wow, yeah, I'll have to keep my eye out for that in the showing, I think. Wow. So, I didn't realize you could even do that in these games.
Well, like the headbutt animation, like Bonk like leaned forward, and once I like did it in the facing away from the boss, so obviously when you're leaning forward, you know it's showing.
Yeah, the game is quite suggestive sometimes. Yeah, I've been enjoying all the it seems to be quite a funny game, like saying it's for all the Bonk kids, and I think he had some other jokey funny thing from the game. Yeah, we love Bonk 3.
It's just a random sign that says that, and it's practically advertising the game after you've already bought it.
I can definitely see a point to that, yep. Yeah, no, it seems pretty good. So yeah, I'll be sure to link the showing if you send me the schedule or something, and yeah. So where can people find you, what you're working on and stuff? Do you often stream your work, or do you tend to just...
I barely ever stream. I sometimes stream, but then I often stop. Like, I haven't bothered recently. Like,
Yeah, that's fair
like
enough. And I imagine a lot
Memory
of your other work is
TAS,
judging and whatnot.
Twitch.tv MemoryTAS is where I stream, but it's fairly rare. Um, I'm on Twitter at MemoryTAS. Um, on task videos, on Memory, on Discord, on MemoryTAS. Google, like YouTube searching MemoryTAS will probably bring up my channel, hopefully.
Mm.
It's an old channel,
Yeah, I should hope
so
so.
it's an old channel, and Memory wasn't like my first name username, so I'm not always sure how that works.
Yeah. But I'm sure people will be able to find it, and I'll have a link to it too. Cool. Yeah, and you've done a lot of other TASs as well, so we did talk a lot about Bonk 3 today, but I think people would have a good time looking through everything else you've done as well. Not to mention all the TASs that you've judged, all 100 and whatever of them.
I forget if I've reached 100. Yeah, I've reached 100.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, no, I was taking a look earlier. I also tried to see if you judged any of mine, but it turns out you've only done one. I thought you'd done more than that, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, thanks for coming on. I enjoyed finding out a lot more about Bonk. Seemed like a pretty obscure game, but it's nice to have such a dedicated community. It seems pretty unique and cool. Yeah.
it's that thing where, like, it was big for the TurboGrafx 16, but the problem is that the TurboGrafx 16 is already pretty small.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
Like, I remember first hearing about the series in Nintendo Power when Virtual Console was a thing. Like, they made a big deal about like the TurboGrafx 16 and that. And obviously, one of the games they brought up was Bonk. That was my introduction to the series.
I didn't realize they still had Nintendo Power when the Wii was out.
Oh yeah, I think it might have died like right before the Wii U or like right after.
Yeah, I always imagine it being kind of like they started advertising GameCube, then it died, so it must have gone a lot longer than I thought.
But yeah, Virtual Console was more or less my introduction. There was actually about to be another Bonk released for like WiiWare, PSN, and Xbox Live Arcade. The problem was, um, you might have remembered the 2010 or 2011 earthquake in Japan,
Yeah.
and that was pretty much why development was canceled. I think
Wow.
part of it was because like the plot of the game was like prehistoric meltdown. Like there would be like a major catastrophe happening in the Bonk world, and they might have felt it would be like insensitive, like right after the earthquake. I That's what I read.
That's fair enough. But yeah, maybe it'll come to light someday. Maybe
Well,
we'll have Bonk in
now,
Smash.
now, now, all of Hudson Soft's properties are owned by Konami, so it it's like it feels very dead. There's a reason people don't like Konami nowadays. But anyways, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on. I enjoyed hearing a lot about it. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening as well.
All right, bye.